Can you change a stranger's life in a single night? I tried to do just that. My name is Mark Manson. I'm a 3-time #1 New York Times bestselling author, and over the last 20 years, I have helped tens of thousands of people give fewer fucks and get their life together. Over the course of 4 nights, I had the opportunity to work with 30 strangers and try to have as much impact in as little time as possible. In this video, I'm gonna explain exactly what I did, why I did it, and reveal some of the results. To give a little bit of context, so about 6 months ago, Airbnb came to me and they were like, Mark, we want to host an experience. And I was like, okay, that's cool, but like, what kind of experience? And they said, whatever you want. We'll host it, we'll pay for it, we'll cover it. Basically, we just want to give people a transformative experience. And I was like, anything? And they said, sure. So I put them to the test, and sure enough, they came through. They let me do pretty much anything I wanted. I had a clean slate, a blank check, and I said, fuck it, we're gonna go for it. So the first question was, what is the container of the experience? And this question matters a lot because the container of the experience in many ways defines how we experience the experience. For example, I'm sitting here at a desk, I'm talking to you. Clearly this is a container of I am educating you or explaining something to you in some way. But if we change the container, for example, let's say I started doing this YouTube video from a children's playground. Now, you probably have all sorts of preconceived assumptions and connotations that you associate with a child's playground. One of which is that it's goofy as fuck and a little bit weird. And it's probably more difficult to take me seriously as long as I'm talking here. And this exemplifies why the container of an experience has such an impact on the experience itself. Every experience we go into, there are all these unconscious assumptions and relationships that we associate with the environment that we're in. If you walk into a lecture hall, you are expecting to be lectured to. If you walk into a church basement, you are probably have some sort of association that people are gonna bare their souls and there's gonna be cheap coffee and a lot of tears. I wanted people to enter this experience feeling a responsibility for their own growth, to have their own realizations, to tell their own stories. So I asked myself, what is the container that creates the environment conducive to that? And the conclusion I came to, a dinner table. As we can see, different contexts define how we have different experiences. This is why travel is often so impactful. If you go spend a month in Spain, it's not that you're like a different person while in Spain, you're in a different context. All of your previous assumptions and habits and routines have been removed, stripped away, and so what is left is actually very core to who you are. It's core to your identity. So choosing the proper context is extremely important. If you're trying to make as much impact in a person's life in as short of time as possible, then it makes sense to make the experience as unique as possible. After all, the people attending this dinner were going to be huge fans of mine. It was going to be a very exciting and special occasion to be able to sit with me for multiple hours and have a very intimate conversation. So I wanted to lean into that. I really wanted to play up the uniqueness and specialness of the occasion. And so that is why I went with a very quiet, intimate dinner. Now, this wouldn't just be any dinner. This was going to be a very special occasion. So I wanted it to be in a big, beautiful house on the beach in Malibu with the sun setting. I wanted people to be absolutely floored by the uniqueness of the experience and just in awe throughout the evening. But this brings me to a very important second point, because if you go too hard into the quiet, intimate dinner, then, well, people have preconceived notions about intimate dinners. They have a bunch of assumptions about what should be talked about and what's appropriate dinner conversation and what they should expect from the event. And this is where we introduce something called a pattern break. Now, a pattern break comes from neuro-linguistic programming. It's something that's actually used in marketing all the time, and it's a very simple concept. It's when you use something that subverts people's expectations to draw more attention to yourself. See, the fact that I'm eating a banana in the middle of a YouTube video is not something that you usually expect, which means that you're probably paying more attention to this segment than you are the other segments of the video. That's what a pattern break is. When you combine two things that seemingly don't really go together, it forces our brains to focus extra hard on the situation, be more present, and be more open-minded to something new or some conclusion that we weren't expecting. To put it another way, if our brains can easily predict what's going to come next, then we go on autopilot. And when we're on autopilot, we become our old selves. But if the brain can't predict what comes next, then we have to be open-minded. We have to be present, and we have to open ourselves to new and novel conclusions. So the pattern break for the evening was that this wasn't just a simple dinner. This was Thanksgiving dinner. Yes, I know you're watching this video around Thanksgiving, but it was shot in early October. So when guests arrived and showed up, the last thing they were expecting was turkey and stuffing and mashed potatoes on a very well-decorated dinner table with lots of pretty pumpkins. Aptly, I decided to call the evening No Fucks Giving to exemplify the practice of giving fewer fucks, and off we were. We had our container, a very special, beautiful evening that was very much portrayed the once-in-a-lifetime significance of the occurrence, and then on top of that, we had the pattern break of Thanksgiving dinner, forcing people to open their minds to a new experience and something that was unpredictable, that they didn't know exactly what was going to happen. Now from there, we had to open people up. And in case you've never been to a No Fucks Giving, it's not easy. In fact, people don't become vulnerable and open up completely at the drop of a hat, especially around strangers. It's something that you have to warm them up to. It's a gradual process. This is why achieving true vulnerability in a room of people who don't know each other, it requires a process of gradual disclosure. So what I decided to do was I decided to curate the evening of 3 specific phases of dinner time questions. The first phase was the icebreakers. So you start with your name and where you're from, and I had people talk about 2 things. One was what they were proud of, and the second thing was a challenge that they were going through in their lives at the moment. Now, these are kind of like bare minimum stakes in terms of personal vulnerability. Generally speaking, these are 2 things that, while you wouldn't stand up in a room full of strangers and just proclaim them out of nowhere, if you're asked to stand up and explain them, it's not that hard. So it gets the ball rolling in terms of the self-disclosure. From there, I created a stack of note cards with questions that I passed around, and each person had to read the question and then start answering it. And the initial questions were a little bit more personal, but still not that hard. Like, what is your best fake it till you make it moment? If there's something that you wish more people knew about you but don't, what would it be? If you could have any superpower, what would it be? Again, these are classic dinner party fare, but it does get closer to the core of people's values, what they care about, their personality, and what actually matters to them. And then it's really not until you're about 60 or 90 minutes into the dinner. At this point, people are freely talking about themselves. A number of people at the table have related to each other, and they've been like, oh my God, I'm totally that way too. Or like, oh yeah, I used to do that, or my boyfriend was a fuckboy. And people feel more comfortable self-disclosing. Now, it's in that moment that you go for the kill. No, I don't really mean go for the kill, but like that's where you go for the real shit. That's where you ask the hard questions. Things like, what is one irrational belief that you continue to hold on to even though it is no longer serving you? What is something that you believe to be true that seemingly everybody else around you does not believe to be true? If you could go back and change one thing about your life, what would it be? Now, at this point, people have been actively self-disclosing for close to 2 hours. They have shared personal details about themselves. I've also followed up, prodding people to disclose more personal details about themselves. And this is where we get into key struggles and key insights. This is where people start opening up and finally admitting things like, I feel like there's something wrong with me and I don't know what. Or, I just went through a divorce and I'm still asking myself how I let this happen. Or, I'm 35 and I have no idea what I'm doing with my life and I feel like everything is too late. Everything has passed me by. This is the real shit. This is the real meat of the evening. The real unique pain and insecurity that each of us has somewhere inside of us, that each of us walks around with. Now, I'm going to admit that this was really the only point in the evening that any expertise or skill on my part came into play. There was a fine dance of knowing how far to push people, which questions to ask, when to challenge them and when to support them. Because what you generally find is that people will have a very clear sense of a feeling, right? Like they'll feel a listlessness, they'll feel adrift, they'll feel like they don't have direction. But if you try to get them to actually describe it, to crystallize that feeling in like a single statement, they really have a hard time. And so that's where I came in. I would ask them clarifying questions. What other parts of your life does this pattern come up to? Does this feel true about you? If it doesn't, what doesn't feel true about it? And my goal with each person at the dinner table was to get them to boil down whatever their current struggle was into a single sentence, a single crystallized belief that they hold about themselves that is no longer serving them. And then once we found that belief, I had them write it down. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all the science and cliches about the importance of writing shit down. Let's just say it's important to write shit down. But what's more important is that having that false belief, having that limitation that you've imposed on yourself on a piece of paper in front of you, and then asking those people how it makes them feel to read it out loud to a group full of strangers, it can be extremely powerful. There was a lot of emotions. For some people, it was anger. For others, it was confusion. For a lot of people, it was sadness. We had a number of people cry at these dinners. But once we had that sheet of paper in front of us, that's when I had them take it outside. Because what did we do next? That's right. We ripped off Tony Robbins and we walked on some fucking fire. I told you Airbnb, let me do whatever the fuck I wanted. I told them, I said, I want to walk on some burning hot coals on the beach at sunset, and we're going to set our limiting beliefs on fire. It's going to be metaphorical and shit. Like I said, man, they came through. So we went outside. I explained to everybody that they were about to walk through fire. You know, it's funny, the fire walking thing, it's an old self-help cliche. Like Tony Robbins has been doing it forever. It's pretty cool though. I'm going to be honest, I'd never done it before. It does serve a pretty important purpose though, which is that things that often appear impossible or extremely dangerous on the surface, once you do them, once you go through them, once you're on the other side, you're like, oh, that was it? And then it makes you wonder what else in your life is like that. Now, I made this point to everybody. I said, you've now written down something that feels so monumentally true, so massively important. We have declared that this is hurting you. This belief, holding on to this perception, is actively hurting you. The same way that your perception that walking on fire is going to hurt you. And so we're going to prove to ourselves that many of the things that we perceive as hurting us don't necessarily have to hurt us. Many of the things that we perceive as being true aren't necessarily true. Many of the things that we perceive ourselves as not being capable of doing, we can actually do extremely easily. Because here's the secret, folks. Walking on fire is easy as fuck. You want to know the trick? All right, I'm going to give away the secret. You know, this is generations of self-help gurus are about to banish me from the industry cocktail parties, but you know what? You deserve it. Here's the secret to walking on fire. It turns out that coals, while they can get extremely hot, they don't conduct heat well. This is why they're so good for cooking. They stay hot for a really, really long time because the heat doesn't dissipate as quickly as other substances. So what that means is that when you put your foot on them, the heat doesn't transfer from the coal to your foot nearly as quickly as, say, metal or sand or some other hot surface. So as long as you're not dawdling or standing still or putting too much pressure on the coals, as long as you just kind of glide over light on your feet, it's not too bad. Now, I know I'm spoiling a century of self-help guru wisdom by telling you that, but honestly, you could just ask ChatGPT and it would tell you the same thing. But the point is the metaphor. By walking through the fire, you come out the end another person. Do you? I don't know. The point is that it's a scary, hard thing, and when people do scary, hard things, there's a rush of adrenaline, and it boosts your confidence, and it does get you to question a lot of the other things that maybe you assume to be true about yourself, the other limitations that you had about yourself. And so we get to the end of the evening. People just bared their souls to a table full of strangers. They had a really fucking great piece of turkey, and they walked on fire. And so we had a little celebratory toast. We took some selfies, and we just enjoyed the beautiful Malibu sunset. Now, celebration is important. It's the positive reinforcement of a good experience. If somebody does something difficult or something uncomfortable or feels some degree of transformation, you want to reinforce that with positive experiences and positive emotions. So we had 4 great evenings. Everybody had a great time. The Mark Manson fairy dust was sprinkled across every participant. Every single life was changed forever. Actually, that's not really true. See, here's the funny thing. Like, I opened this video saying, can you change a stranger's life in a single night? The answer is yes, you can, but can you predictably change every person's life in a single night? And the answer is no. And there's a number of reasons for that. Not everybody is in the exact right moment for change at that particular moment in their life. Every journey is different. Some journeys are long and drawn out and slow. Other journeys are like a lightning bolt cracking you open. But you can't control that. I certainly can't control that. All I can do is create the context and the environment to make it as conducive as possible to change, and then hope that change emerges. The other issue is that a lot of change actually cannot happen in an instant. For example, you can't develop new habits in an instant. By definition, you need a lot of time to develop new habits. The same is true about a lot of habitual self-perception or beliefs. The real truth is that you can only do so much in one night. While I do feel like I optimized those 3 or 4 hours as well as I could, and I did bleed Airbnb for every cent they were willing to part with, ultimately, I'm only one man, and it was only one Thanksgiving turkey. I am happy to say that every single evening, there were at least one person who had a very profound insight or profound moment. Many people did come up to me and said that the evening had changed their lives, but I also know how worked up and emotional people get in these sorts of situations. After hearing everybody's story throughout the 4 nights, my greatest takeaway is that most human problems are not unique. It was incredible how many people shared something that they felt was very deeply personal to themselves, that immediately at least 1 or 2 other people at the table were like, oh, that's me. I'm dealing with that exact same thing. And it's funny because it's like when we're dealing with the problems, and our natural inclination is to never talk about them. And because we never talk about them, we just assume that we're the only ones who have that problem. But one of the privileges and benefits of my position, from hearing from so many thousands of people from all over the world all the time, is you realize how common every human problem is. It's funny because most of us assume that when we have a personal problem, we need to talk to a close family member or a friend, that extra layer of empathy or compassion is going to be the most powerful. And like, while that's always a good idea, I do think that there is something uniquely special that comes from revealing some of your deepest problems to a group of strangers. And that when the strangers stick up their hand and say, wow, I'm exactly the same way. I have that problem too. And like, they're from a different country, they're of a different gender, you've never met them before, they have a completely different walk of life. It really starts to give you that perception of like how common most of these issues are, how inherent they are to the human condition. It's well established that talking about your problems, writing your problems down, like these things have inherent healing powers. Like, we've known this since fucking Sigmund Freud. When you verbalize the mental and emotional challenges that you're going through, they start to lose their power over you. And so if I did nothing else the entire evening, if I did nothing correctly other than just simply getting people to open up about their problems a little bit, to verbalize them, to conceptualize them, to make them more conscious, that alone would instigate some degree of change. And then you set shit on fire, and like, that's when the real stuff happens. Fact of the matter is that change is extremely hard. It's also complicated. It's also difficult to know when it's actually happened or not. So I have no illusions that I've changed 30 strangers' lives. All I know is that I had a great experience, and I hope to have many more of these experiences again. Now, if you'd like to be notified of experiences like this night, we plan on doing a lot of special events in 2026 with my community. So check out membership.solvepodcast.com to join that community, and you can hear more from us. Until next time, enjoy the turkey.